Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to Thirsty Thoughts on Investing. Today, we're going to talk about a gentleman of modest means who had a massive accrual of wealth over the course of his life, and his name is Ronald Reed. And there's an interesting lesson on wealth in this for every single one of us. So let's go ahead and jump straight in. Thirsty Thoughts on Investing: the story of Ronald Reed. And what has this man with such an unassuming name got to do with wealth? You will learn as the story goes on. So who is Ronald Reed? What did he do? Ronald Reed was born in America way back when in the 1920s. Ronald Reed grew up, modest existence, modest life. Nothing really too remarkable about Ronald. The reason why I'm telling this story about him is the reason why he's noteworthy developed as his life went on. Ronald had a standard life, standard income. He worked as a janitor in a school. He fought in World War II, 1943 to 1945. When he was discharged, he came back to America, he came back to where he lived, which was in Connecticut. And Ronald at that point began his job in a school working as a janitor. He took up his old position, the same one he had before he left to fight in World War II. So Ronald was working, modest life, modest income, no greater expenses. He was noted for his frugality. He was noted because his clothes that he wore were not particularly flattering. He had some dungarees. He used to pin together the dungarees with this metal pin so that it meant that they wouldn't fall apart. They were so old, they were so tired, they were so used that, as I say, these things were just pretty much totally disintegrated. Now, as well as that, when he used to park his car at the school, he drove this really old Toyota that he got secondhand. He used to park it as far away as possible, then walk to work so that he didn't have to spend any money on parking meters. That was his means of saving more money. Now, Ronald, around about this time, shortly after the war, he met his wife to be. She had two stepkids. They got married, modest wedding, and Ronald and her bought a modest 2-story house with 3 bedrooms, one for each kid and one for him and his wife, and they settled down. Now, Ronald was known for going to the library every day after work, and no one really knew why. They just thought he was into reading. He finished at 5 o'clock, but he always used to come home from work at 6:30. His wife always used to ask him what he read about. He used to talk about how he read about the markets and investing, but he didn't really speak about it that much. Now, Ronald, as he went through life, he always saved his money. He was very good at that. He was very, very, very frugal. But no one really quite knew what he did with it. You know, he wasn't on a particularly big wage. He wasn't on a lot of money working as a janitor in a school. He did his 9 to 5, and that's about it. Now, Ronald was known for reading every single day. He never really talked about what he read, as I said, but he never really talked that much about investing. No one really knew what his hobbies were. But to the unassuming eye, he was perceived to be a completely normal person and in no way remarkable or no way particularly interesting. And that's the guise that Ronald used to like to wear. Now, as Ronald went through life, he retired, he was 65. He continued to go about his life the way he did before, his humble existence. He never really spent that much money. He never really went over the top. He never really went crazy. Now, that was fine. Ronald reached the age of 92, creature of habit, never really did anything different throughout his life, definitely enjoyed his comfort zone, and perpetually did this. Now, here's the thing. Ronald was on his deathbed. Ronald wrote his will, all right? And he didn't want anybody to look at it until after he passed away. Soon that day came as his health started to decline. Very sad day. He was a popular member of the community. His wife and his 2 stepkids, they mourned him, they missed him. And then when the time came, they opened the will that he'd left behind. Now, they read the will, and on the will it said that Ronald had a total wealth of $8 million. This was in 2012. He had a total wealth of $8 million. And they thought to themselves, Ronald had obviously become delirious towards the end of his decline in health before he passed away, and that this could not be right. Sure enough, they contacted the lawyer, and it said that he had a total estate of $8 million. He had $7.9 million in stocks, and he had $100,000 valued house. And they thought, how the heck has this happened? How has he kept this quiet? He'd left 2 million to his stepkids. He'd left 1 million to his wife, and he left the rest to his hospital. They looked at Ronald's portfolio, his stock portfolio, and they realized what he'd been doing for decades. He'd been buying stocks that were well diversified across every single possible large industry in America. This was before the days of funds. He just bought loads of stocks and he spread it out really thinly. And they realized when they looked back at his contributions to the stocks that he'd been consistently buying the same things over and over and over and averaging his way in. Ronald bought stocks that paid him high dividends yields. Instead of taking the money out, he just reinvested it. Ronald did this for 40 years and he'd accrued wealth of 8 million. And he lived such a frugal existence that no one could even tell the difference. And in this lies a huge life lesson for most of us. How many of us do really well as dentists, but we still can't accrue wealth? We still can't build our wealth past a certain point. And if somebody who is on a wage that is not that high, yet has a meager and frugal existence, is able to attain that level of wealth, even though we mightn't want to go to that extreme, to the extreme where we're not spending any money whatsoever, it still gives us a really, really, really powerful lesson. And there's still something in there that we can learn. And for me, the greatest lesson in that story is that Ronald shows us that saving money and investing and growing our wealth is more about discipline rather than anything else, and more about mastering our psychology and understanding the principles of investing, and then just doing it consistently over and over again. Now, it's not just as simple as that. No financial advice. It doesn't mean you can just go out there and buy a load of stocks and hope for the best. Ronald did well. Ronald bought at a time when most stocks went up. Will that continue? Will that always be the case? Who knows? But certainly there is a lesson in there in terms of behavior, in terms of how we construct our portfolios, and in terms of how we go about our lives. And that's the most powerful lesson of Ronald Reed. He never earned more than $20,000 in his whole life, yet he accrued 8 million in wealth over the course of about 40 years. How crazy is that? If Ronald Reed can do it, what excuse do the rest of us have if we're all doing so much better than that, if we're earning more, or even if we're earning in and around that? Either way, it doesn't matter. What it shows you is it's more about discipline and skill and ability and understanding how things work. Massive lesson in that. Always remember that £20,000 in the stocks and shares ISA for 20 years, which appreciates at a rate of 10% a year, is £1.3 million. That's enough to retire on for most people. That's £20,000 in an ISA over 20 years at your typical rates of appreciation that you might find in the stock market. Like I say, no financial advice. Do your own research. You have to know what to put in your ISA. It's not enough just to have the ISA, but those are the stats that will show us just how wealth can be accumulated if we think about it and if we calibrate what we're doing and do it consistently and do it with discipline. Awesome. So the lesson in that for us all, if we want to accrue real wealth and do it over a long period of time, save hard. Invest consistently, because that means you average your way in. You're not exposed too much to volatility and you even out the journey, you smooth out the ride. The most foolproof way to grow your wealth, you can do it consistently over long periods of time. No financial advice. Please do your own research, but that lesson is absolutely massive, and the power of stories is crazy because they stick with people and they guide our actions and they give us the ability to understand what we're doing. Thank you so much, and we'll see everybody again next week.